Welcome to Stoneware Stories, folk pottery of Edgefield, South Carolina in the International Terminal. My name is Nicole Mullen, and I am Curator of Exhibitions at SFO Museum at the San Francisco International Airport. This exhibition explores the origins of Southern stoneware, which was first made in Edgefield, South Carolina in the early 1800s. It features the work of some of Edgefield's most influential potters, including Thomas Chandler and David Drake. In the Northeast, potters commonly use salt to glaze stoneware in the European tradition. But in the southern United States, where salt was a more precious commodity, potters applied alkaline glazes, which required wood ashes or lime. The technique originated in Han Dynasty China and was pioneered in the southern United States by Dr. Abner Landrum, a South Carolina physician and newspaper editor. Landrum most likely studied published accounts of Chinese alkaline glaze formulas. He established the Pottersville Stoneware Manufactory around 1815. By 1850, a number of factories had opened to fulfill the demand for utilitarian wares, such as jugs and storage jars. Traditionally, Southern potteries were small, family-owned seasonal operations, but Edgefield potteries were ambitious enterprises. Enslaved laborers and later freed African Americans engaged in all aspects of Edgefield stoneware production. Master potter Thomas Chandler elevated the aesthetics of Edgefield pottery. Born in Virginia, Thomas Chandler moved with his family to Baltimore, Maryland in 1817. His father, a chairmaker, opened a shop nearby several local important potteries. Chandler most likely learned to craft salt glazed stoneware with slip decoration in his youth by working with local potters. After moving to Edgefield in the late 1830s, Chandler introduced beautiful and distinctive celadon-colored glazes, similar to those produced in China and Korea. He also introduced slip decorating, in which liquid clay is brushed or trailed onto a vessel surface before firing. As you can see here, he often adorned pots with draped lines or loops, or swags and tassels. Chandler worked at several different potteries in Edgefield before opening his own workshop there in 1850. He added the word "warranted" to some of his pottery at his workshop to distinguish it from the work of other factories and indicate its superiority. Chandler closed his pottery in 1852 as a result of his declining health and moved to North Carolina, where he died at the young age of 44. In this case, we feature pottery from the Colin Rhodes factory, Thomas Chandler's greatest competitor. Rhodes' factory offered a variety of slip-decorated wares. Some scholars suspect that women may have served as decorators at the factory due to existing documentation that records women being paid more than their male counterparts. If so, it demonstrates an unusual practice, as men typically turned in decorated wares in Edgefield. This case features pottery from a legendary figure in Edgefield, the enslaved potter known as Dave, who took the surname Drake following emancipation. David Drake made pottery over the course of more than 40 years. He learned to craft stoneware as an adolescent at Pottersville. It is remarkable that Drake signed and dated many of his pots. In this way, he left an astonishing record of his artistic talent and engaged in an extraordinary act of resistance. This was during an era of extreme oppression. Even after South Carolina passes a draconian law in 1834, making it illegal to teach enslaved people to read and write, Drake continued to sign and date many of his pots. Drake was the only antebellum Southern potter to inscribe poetry onto wares. He also created some of the largest handmade storage jars ever produced in the United States. Drake inscribed many of his pot poems while enslaved at Lewis Miles's factory during the 1850s and early 1860s. His short poems reflect his daily life. Some are lighthearted, others more serious. This example from the Smithsonian National Museum of American History was inscribed in 1862 and reads, "I made this jar, olive cross. If you don't repent, you will be lost." An 1873 newspaper article referred to him as one-legged Dave Drake. It is even more remarkable, then, to think about what this great potter achieved during his lifetime. This jug is attributed to Carrie Dixon, an African-American potter who knew Drake. Vase vessels may be the most well-known form of Southern folk pottery. The tradition flourished at the Palmetto Fire Brick Works during the early 1860s, when enslaved potters made utilitarian wares during the Civil War. Thomas Chandler also crafted vase vessels, perhaps as early as the late 1830s. Most likely, these vase vessels derived from both European ceramic and African anthropomorphic wood carving traditions. The tradition of Southern vase jugs continues. In fact, Lanier Metters, a Southern folk potter from Georgia, who was active from the 1970s to the 90s, made several thousand during his career, and is largely responsible for vase jugs becoming an icon of Southern folk art. This case features pots from other Edgefield antebellum potteries, such as N. Ramey & Co. As Edgefield potters left South Carolina, lured by land in westward states, including Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Texas, they disseminated the craft of alkaline glazed stoneware. The Civil War and its aftermath further led to the industry's decline, although a handful of potteries remained in operation to fulfill the needs of the local market. Potter Rich Williams had a shop at the turn of the century located on the Tiger River near Gowansville, where he made alkaline glazed wares that he fired in a traditional Southern groundhog kiln. Williams may have descended from a freed African-American Edgefield potter, or he might have learned to turn wares from an upcountry potter in the area during the late 1800s. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Stoneware Stories, folk pottery of Edgefield, South Carolina, in the International Terminal at SFO.